Welcome to the Creative Plane Podcast Network. Join us as we review our favorite RPGs, collectible card games, MMOs, video games, PC games, and bring up interesting topics and things that we'd like to share with everyone. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Kelly, aka Trixie from Ragnarok and Roll, a Scion to Ragnarok story, and Tilda Wimblewick from D&D Journey of the 5th Edition. First off, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for listening to our varied adventures, as well as for rating us on iTunes and RPGpodcast.com. If you haven't rated us yet, we would greatly appreciate it if you could. And if you're looking for more ways to support our efforts, we are now on Patreon, a great site where you can help us continue making more podcasts, as well as some special surprises for our patrons. If you can, please look us up at www.patreon.com/cppn. Every little bit helps. And again, thank you for listening.
Writers are bad people, you guys.
No, we're just creative. Speaking of which, does anyone want a lollipop?
How am I supposed to talk around the lollipop?
I don't know, I'm not going to do it.
They can have lollipops.
It's a trick to keep everyone in the audience quiet. That's a good
I
plan.
want to encourage speaking, so I'm not going
remember one of the panels I went to with writers, and they said the only difference between my browser history and the serial killers is there's probably enough random other stuff that the CIA has figured out. I think it's a writer.
Oh God, yeah, I'm just like, Google must be judging me constantly, because what was the thing that so I'm writing the second one of these comic books, which is an adaptation of this woman, Bonnie Jo Campbell's work, and her work is very dark. It's called Rural Noir, and it's all these people who live sort of outside of Kalamazoo, Michigan, and they're all like drug addicts or being like violently physically abused. So the first story in the book is this very short story where there's a 13-year-old girl and her parents, and they're on the porch of their house, and they open the door. It's like a summer cottage, and these people have broken in and they've been using it to cook meth, and then they left. And there was a girl that they had basically allowed to come in, and they exchanged drugs for sex, and the girl is 16, and she's been there all week after the guys leave, and as the 13-year-old is walking in the front door, the 16-year-old is sneaking out the back door, and it's sort of the girl going through the house and like seeing what's happened in this week, and then the last thing she finds is a cum-stained mattress on the back porch. And so I'm like Googling for reference images for like kitchen destroyed by meth dealers and cum-stained mattress, and the worst part of it is I didn't even get any relevant hits for cum-stained mattress.
I'm not sure if that's the worst thing. That might be the best.
At some point, you have to put the plus sign between the two words to get Google to find it correctly.
Cum-stained mattress. The exact line that the original author wrote is, "More jism than the mother has ever seen in her life." And then
See, if you Googled that, maybe you would have gotten somewhere.
after I illustrated the final panel of more jism than the mother has ever seen in her life, and I went to my husband and I was like, "What do you think of this picture?" And I was like, "It's supposed to be more jism than the woman has ever seen in her life." And she said, my husband said something to the effect of like, "Possibly I've seen more jism than the mother had in the story, but..." Anyway.
Anyone can write.
Anyone can write.
Welcome to our panel.
But should they?
Let's do that. Okay, yes. Yes, it is after 6 o'clock, so whether or not we like it, that is our segue into our panel. Anyone can write.
Good job.
Yes.
Thank you.
Or draw. But anyway.
Or draw, yes. I am your moderator, KJ Kabza. I'm sorry. I'm ready. I am so ready. I write short science fiction and fantasy. I've sold short stories for about the past 15 years to over 40 different places, about 70 different stories. My debut print collection is coming out in January. The Ram's Head Algorithm and Other Stories. Here's my subtle marketing message as per request of my publisher.
Beautiful. It's so pretty.
No, it's not. It's not going to be quite that kind of panel. It's only 6 p.m.
I know.
You
Put that on the front of this.
No, it won't. It won't stick. We tried that. If you want, you can pre-order it now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or IndieBound. If you want more information about it, come up afterwards. Grab a business card, a pen, or back issues of these magazines in which you can read a sample of my work for free. In addition to my professional work, I have also some fan fiction floating around in the grain out there. I also have some work under a different name in the furry fandom. And I've written and drawn greeting cards. I've done eulogies, wedding toasts. I've written poetry for friends, journals for myself. So I've written all kinds of things, and not just for money.
My name is Monica Friedman. I've been writing speculative fiction for about 30 years, although I am less widely published than KJ is. But you can buy my novel, The Hermit, on Amazon. And I have a few short stories that are published, and also you can buy this comic book if you want. It does not feature a home-stay mattress in it, unfortunately. But it's got some other choice stuff in it that you might be interested in if you're interested in stuff like that. And I have an MFA in creative writing from Western Michigan University, and I've done some teaching of writing also.
I'm Mira Domsky. My 4th published short story is in this charity anthology, Iron Doves, and all of the money goes to the Doves program, which helps protect people from domestic violence, stalking, things like that, and about information about resources for people who are maybe in a bad situation on the back. I made the mistake of getting a degree in creative writing from the U of A.
Was the mistake the degree, or was the mistake the U of A?
Both, I think.
Okay.
I'm not sure. And I have also written many things for no money. The weirdest one was probably the epic poem about my friend's boobs for her birthday. Her boobs rescued a princess from, I think, was it Ogre?
I've also written in that genre.
A boob rescue?
Well, general kind of.
I like that really evasive answer.
Erotic friend fan fiction.
Oh, sure, yes.
In poetry form, yes.
Was there a lot of butt wrapping?
There was a lot of it was steamy, but didn't get anywhere till the end, I guess.
Okay. I think that does it perhaps for introductions.
Or ought to.
or ought to. So this is what this panel is. We all believe, for various reasons and to various degrees, that anyone can write, everyone should write, or some combination of the two. We're going to talk about why we believe that, all the fun ways you can start writing or get involved in writing, and why you should. Spoiler alert, it's fun. So we do invite questions and comments from you guys. The audience is small. I have a note down here saying please raise your hand, but there's only 3 of you, so probably if you just start talking, it won't be much of an interruption, so feel free. So I have some introductory questions here for the panelists. Why do you believe that anyone can write?
All right, so I'm more on the side of everyone should write, and I believe that it's just a very healthy activity in which to engage. I think that journaling is, I think everyone should journal. I think like the unexamined life is sort of the life that slips past you, and you don't tend to recognize your mistakes or fix them if you're not thinking about them, and journaling is a really good way to do that. I'm a person who's lived a lot in my fantasy worlds, and so bringing them out of myself and putting them into the world has helped put me into the world and make me a person who's like capable of sitting up here and having a conversation or whatever that is, versus like the person who's always in the book or always in my head. So it feels good. It's really good for you just to express yourself however that is, and especially expressing yourself in journal form, because like there's no judgment, right? Like probably no one will read it. If you're lucky, no one will read it. You hope no one reads it. Yeah, and that's the only form of writing that you hope no one ever reads. It's your like personal. I guess people write poetry and hope they're not read, but maybe some people do. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a healthy activity. I think it's something that when you do it, you become a better person eventually. That's my thought.
I agree with Monica. I mean, I think you need to have a way to express yourself, and whether or not someone else reads it, like if you don't express yourself, I don't want to say you go crazy, but maybe you go crazy.
I mean, I would. That's in fact that's my favorite. It's a line from Ray Bradbury. I think he says, "You must stay drunk on writing, so reality does not destroy you."
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my favorite lines from a song was New York Minute. And it's about a guy who throws himself in front of a train. I think the line is, at some point he was too much in this world. And yeah, if I didn't write, if I didn't read, if I didn't do all this stuff, I would be too much in this world.
So let's see.
You didn't give yours, did you?
I didn't give mine yet. We skipped right over the question of why do you believe anyone can write, so I wasn't sure if we should go back to that yet. But so I have this whole other list of why I think people should write. I think both of you kind of like hit the essential, like an essential thing about journaling in particular. Although I think that there's a lot more to it than that. It's not just journaling. I think it can also be, I mean, maybe it goes without saying, but it can be a good creative outlet. In addition for it to be like an emotional outlet, for like a safe place for you to sort of like process and put your feelings and figure out who you are. This kind of sounds a little bit silly, but it keeps you occupied, it keeps you busy. I mean, you know the old saying like idle hands are like the devil's playground or whatever. If you have and maybe to put it in sort of dumber parlance, but like writing is my anti-drug. Like if it gives you something to do that is healthy and constructive, especially if you have a hard time coping with reality or your life is difficult. You don't turn to other self-destructive behaviors or other ways of spending your time that could be expensive, that could be harmful.
You're looking at
It's
me
a
when you
really-
say
it's
this.
a really-
I'm saying it here, and I thought I would spread around the insight. That's not all.
Quit destroying things.
No, I'm just saying, like, that's not the case for me, but okay. I'm going to be self-destructive regardless.
It's so much cheaper than any of my other hobbies.
I'll say something else too. There was a book that I it's like a psychology book, but it's called Every Person's Life is Worth a Novel. And like I think every person's life is worth at least a story. Like and I think there are people who don't believe that about themselves. Like I had this terrible writing job but part of it I did get to do some interviews with people, and they wanted it specifically people who worked in box offices at like music venues or something. And I happen to know a woman who worked in the box office at the Peoria Symphony Orchestra, and I was like, I'd like to interview you. And she said, why? My job is so boring and stupid. And I interviewed her, and so she had some great anecdotes about like people complaining that the trumpets were too shiny, and like but the best one was the violinist Joshua Bell came to the Peoria Symphony Orchestra. Wow. This Peoria, it's cold in the wintertime. She had put her coat down on the table. Joshua Bell put his Stradivarius on top of her coat. So she was without a coat for 2 days because she couldn't touch this $1 million violin. Yeah, so every person's life has many stories in it, I feel. And like that story would have been lost if I didn't write it down. Like she didn't think it was cool that Joshua Bell put his Stradivarius on her winter coat, but it was.
I was thinking more for benefits of writing. I hadn't really given a lot of thought to like the non-fiction work, since most of what I do professionally and even for fun is fiction. But we haven't talked about some of these other things yet, like the like fan fiction and the role of fan fiction. Like that's not something most people get compensated for, but that helps you connect with other people. It helps you build community. It helps you give back to community or to fandom. So like that's definitely huge. I think that's certainly a benefit of writing. I think we kind of already covered this. I mentioned gives you a break from reality. I mean, even if it's a cheap hobby, there are people unplugged from reality all kinds of ways. that's something you can do.
It's funny when you say, because you're saying like it's like you're unplugging, but then you're using it to plug back into other people.
Different ways, I think. So yeah. Other reasons why you should write.
Other reasons why you should write.
I mean, as far as nonfiction goes, to let other people know that they're not alone in their experience. One of the best books I've ever read was, and I'm blanking on the name right now, Jenny Lawson's most recent book. Her first one was called Let's Pretend This Never Happened. I can't remember now. Anyways, it was about living with debilitating mental and physical illness.
Oh yeah.
But it was funny. And it was sort of like, you can live with all of these problems and still find the humor in life and the purpose. And it was just a very self-affirming thing to read. So there's that sort of like the communicating with other people, letting people know that they're not the only one.
Yeah, and once it exists forever. Like you can be telling people that they're okay, many years from now after your experience. And Jack and I know this writer, Anna Redsands, and she's like this really interesting life story, which is that she was the child of Dutch Reformed missionaries, and she was raised on the Navajo reservation. So she was this white girl, and she spoke Dene, and she really wanted to be Navajo, and I think probably if she had been heterosexual, she probably would have married a Navajo man and stayed there, but she also realized, like very surprisingly to herself, that she was gay, and there wasn't any place for her in either of those communities, and she's about 65, 67 now, and it took her 40 years, right, to find her place, and so she wrote this book, it's called To Drink from the Silver Cup. And I read it in many different iterations, because some of it was more focused on the lesbian stuff, some was more on the religion, some was more on the Navajo. She finally figured it out, and she had this book, and she immediately began to shop it to publishers, and right away someone picked it up. And I was like, good for you, it's a great book. And then she had an altercation with the managing editor, and she was like, you can't have my book, and furthermore, I don't think I'm ever going to publish this book. And I was like, what? Somebody's offering to publish your book and you said no? And she was like, I don't know, this and that. She said to me, Monica, who do you think is going to read this book? And I had a list, right? And I was like, oh my God, all of these gender studies people and all these religious studies people, and this, and I went through and I said, and beyond that, and I said, right now, there's a 12-year-old lesbian girl sitting in her room wondering if there's a place in the world for her. She needs your book. Just publish it for that girl. And she went through this whole other thing, and eventually she found another publisher, and she published the book, and it's been very well received. But that was the story, and she just thought, nobody cares about my story. And I was like, oh my God, nobody else has that story. That is a unique story. You are the only white girl raised on an Indian reservation who speaks Dene and integrated the boarding school dorms and all of that stuff. So you might think your story isn't for other people, but other people do want to hear it.
Even if you think you can't write well, or you actually can't write well, somebody will want to read your story. I mean, I'm thinking here of fan fiction that I've read, or other work that I have read, where people they write whatever they want, and boop, it's up, and there's no kind of gatekeeping. It's just anybody can post whatever, and I will read something, and I will think, this is terrible, who even likes this? But there will be 2,000 favorites, 50 comments. So it's all somebody, there's an audience out there somewhere for whatever it is that you make. So don't even if you're not skilled, somebody will like it. Somebody will think it's great. And something else to keep in mind is that even if you do want to write professionally, or someday you want to write professionally, everybody has to start somewhere, and you can't expect magic right out of the gate. Which is not to say that if you want to improve, you shouldn't try, but definitely don't. I think that there's this faulty assumption that you have to be a master at anything to enjoy doing it, and that's absolutely not true.
In my experience, it actually goes the other way. You enjoy it more before you know whether or not you're good. Once you go to graduate school and you start analyzing it, then you're like, everything I do sucks and I hate doing this job.
Yeah, I can't sing. I won't sing where other people can hear me, but I still do it.
Oh, yeah, I play the ukulele very badly and loudly.
I like listening to you.
Some people
See,
feel like
somebody
I'm not
will
like
always
that.
like whatever it is that you make.
Exactly.
So I also have next on here ways to write and get involved in writing. If we have exhausted the topic of why should you write, oh, how about this? Is there any circumstance or reason under which you think you shouldn't write?
Well, you know, it's funny. So when I was younger and I was writing and somebody would like do something that really pissed me off, I would just make them like a petty low-level villain in a story that I was writing. And we definitely I would write these, not erotic friend fanfic, but we had this friend. I would write stories about my friends, and certainly we did write stories in which we killed all of the people we hated. And so this is like the 80s and the early 90s. And like now if you do that, you'll be suspended and they'll send you to a psychologist. So like I'm not saying don't do it, like don't bring it to, like don't show it to the people who might take offense at it.
Or be aware of your audience.
Change people's names.
Maybe change people's names. Yes.
Some other identifying characteristics.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that anyone shouldn't write, but I think people can use anything for bad intent, I guess.
Okay.
So if like you're writing your like 800-page, Unabomber screed or whatever, like maybe you should go get help first. But those people don't recognize themselves, so they shouldn't be doing it. But like, what can I say to
Hate writing. People who leave bad notes just to hurt someone.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
That's a good example.
yeah, because it can be really hurtful.
Like
Sure.
the person who wrote all the notes and stuck them to my back in middle school.
Mhm.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a fake thing.
And it
that
probably
happens.
wasn't even that creative,
No, it was poorly
exactly. Derivative.
Backhand writing.
I got them stuck into my locker. Yeah. I've heard this insult before. Right, or like in a Cyrano de Bergerac where they like do a lame insult of his nose and he's like, no, that's not even good enough, and then he insults his nose for like 20 minutes. Yeah. So some people, don't use writing for cruel purposes, I guess.
What if writing does not make you feel good or you're unhappy with what you produce?
If the act of writing doesn't make you feel good, why does it not make you feel good? Does it not make you feel good because you're 15 years old and you're in high school and they're making you write something terrible? Or is it because you're judging yourself? If you don't like what you produce, you can always throw it out or set it on fire and pretend you never wrote it. So I don't know if that's an excuse.
So you would argue for try first, sort of self-reflect later?
I think there are some people who are never, ever, 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 ever going to like it, like my stepson, for example. I don't see him ever, writing anything for his own personal pleasure, even though it would probably be great for him and he probably should do it, but I wouldn't force him to do it. Yeah.
Any other thoughts about that?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay. I would draw a distinction between writing that makes you feel bad because you're judging yourself, or you have, I think it's Ira Glass that calls it the taste gap or the skill gap of
I've heard this, yeah.
Yeah, so you're both a consumer and a creator, and if you've been consuming something like writing for a very long time and you just start creating it, your palate as a consumer is very refined, so you know what you want to see. But as a creator, you don't yet have the skills to make it there. So
That's hard.
So if you first start out, you're like, I'm unhappy with this. This sucks. I should stop doing this. Do you think that because you're being overly self-critical and you're not giving yourself space to learn, or do you think that because you're just I just plain don't like writing and I would rather express myself sculpting or playing the guitar or something like that?
Makes sense. Makes sense if you're just, as long as you're expressing yourself some way.
Yeah, but it's if you start and you're I'm not good at this, then you sort of miss that, and the 10,000 hours to mastery it's not like a scientific principle, but if you've put 10 hours into something and you put 10,000 hours into something, the 10,000 hour result is probably going to be way better. So you haven't even gotten to the part where you should be criticizing your own work, maybe.
Well, I think there's always that myth of talent. I don't think talent is a real thing.
You don't think so?
No, I mean like you're drawing something and people are like, oh, that's really good. It's you're fortunate to be so talented. No, I'm not fortunate. I just never put down the crayon when I was 5. So, I don't know.
At what point do you think somebody can say, or it's safe to say, like, I have given writing this long good try, and no matter what I try, I still don't like it, and it still sucks. Like, where is the point where you go, writing is not for me?
When you finish college.
Okay. That was a very quick, short answer.
Because I'm just like, whatever, how are you going to get anywhere in life if you can't do it till then?
I don't know, I think that's a really hard personal decision, because I mean, when I was struggling with writing a novel a couple years ago, I got to have dinner with Paolo Bacigalupi, who won every single prize you possibly could win for his first novel, The Wind-Up Girl. And I was like, how do you deal with feeling bad about what you're writing and not liking it? He's like, I finished The Wind-Up Girl and I felt like I had failed massively. And I was like, what? Because he won every single award you could. And it was just, I don't know, it was a very eye-opening experience for me to hear him say that he felt like he had failed. And I think it's hard to decide. I mean,
it sounds like you're saying you should never give up then.
Well, maybe, because I've tried to give up a bunch of times and it just never seems to take. I tried to quit 3 times.
You have some determined needs.
I mean, I don't mean
it's just
I've never tried to quit. I've had sort of moments in my life where I moved away from it, but I mean, I think it draws you back in if you're that person. I don't think anyone asking that question would be like, "Oh, I suck. I should walk away from it."
Yeah,
and
you can't just quit things because you feel like you're good.
And if you're saying that, then obviously you're vested in it, and it's important to you, and you actually want to continue, and maybe what you actually need is a writing group and some critical feedback, and to read some how-to books and to read more great literature, because I think that's really a good way to learn. Yeah.
I guess thinking about what you said about The Wind-Up Girl, I think that to some degree, everybody who writes, even people who write at a professional level, kind of carry forever with them this little doubt that maybe I shouldn't write at all. So I guess some level of doubt is gonna be with you no matter how skilled you are.
Maybe.
I don't mean that to sound nihilistic, but
it just reminded me of this anecdote. As you know, Neil Gaiman is married to Amanda Palmer, the musician, and she wanted to write a book. Which is what I heard sort of being a very ballsy person who asks for stuff, and that's how she's gotten everything in her life. And so she wrote the book, and then Gaiman was helping her edit it, and she tweeted something to the effect of this resulted in screaming arguments between the two of them, with Gaiman saying, "I'm really good at this, goddammit, I win awards!" So maybe Gaiman does not second guess himself.
Okay, that guy doesn't, but many writers do.
That's awesome.
But saying that, I know I've probably told you I do not expect you to remember. But, because I've told everybody who asks me about writing, I have a learning disability. So one of the first things a librarian told me when she found out I had a learning disability is she goes, "Oh, writing's not for you." The day she did that, I went, I don't care if it's the worst thing I write, I am going to write a book. Now, I've been working on it since high school. He's helped. And I'm sitting here when you guys are talking about looking crazy. I have to talk to the computer to write. I really look crazy.
Well, we all talk to ourselves.
Yeah, but I mean, when
That's
it's...
why you get pets, so you don't feel like you're talking to yourself.
I've heard of other authors who use dictation software.
Yeah,
so.
I've heard it more and more. They're like, some of them say it actually works better because speaking it's totally different from writing it.
Oh, to me, that really is.
Yeah, and typing uses a different area of your brain from handwriting.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, it's fascinating.
And I mean, and for multiple reasons. In one case, for different reasons, and I think it's fate messing with it, using one of many words you can use for it. My book, I have never been able to successfully finish because it either the memory card breaks. That's the most common one. I accidentally deleted stuff like that. But each time, things change. Each time. It's not the book I started with, but I'm like, when it's done, I don't really care if other people like it. I mean, I do care, but it's for me. And to me, that one person needs it. Now, I'm going with it. I am taking somebody's suggestion, which I'm having fun with. Somebody told me, take a step back, use the same world, but write it from a different person's opinion. And the amount of stuff I've gotten over this compared to the other years, minus me losing it. So I have gotten more information about the story setup and less than I'd say 2 years than I have in 15. Because I've tweaked it. Because it's always been, okay, I have to put all this information in the story. No, I don't. Especially if this one, it's like, I can just do this section of it. And touch on the other stuff that the other story will touch on. Because I know what I'm writing. Because I'm writing it for me, I'm going to finish it. If it matters for the other people, that's not the point. For me, it will be finished. So, yes, I have to say, and no, she didn't do it because she thought that would start my fire. She said it because that's what she truly felt.
I have a crazy thing for a librarian to say. And do you know the writer Patricia Polacco? She writes some children's books. I saw her in a blizzard in Michigan one time. And so she's got this book that I love. It's called Thank You, Mr. Faulkner. And it's a story about a little girl who has extreme, and it's not just numbers, it's not just letters, it's numbers. And she's a great artist, but she just can't, it doesn't look like anything to her. And she's so smart, she manages to fake her way to 5th grade before a teacher points out, oh, you can't really read, and then gives her the intervention she needs. And Polacco puts a footnote in the book, which is, it's a true story, but it actually happened when she was 14. She managed to go until she was a freshman in high school, unable to read at all, before a teacher was like, you have a problem, let me help you. And now she's a writer. So it's, I can't believe a librarian would say that. It's just such a thoughtless thing to say.
Yeah. Well, it was a school librarian, so I don't know if she was doing it for a passion. No. I don't mean, you know what I mean. I hope.
No, I mean, I definitely think that another thing that can throw you off on the subject of when is it time to give up, or how do I know I can't write? Sometimes you just need a small tweak to your process, or you just need to try something a little bit different, and that it just changes everything and absolutely helps you going. So that's another reason, I guess, why everybody should write, is that there are so many different techniques that work for so many different people, and that maybe you just have not yet found the thing that helps you create well, or that helps your story work, or that really puts your process into high gear, or helps you get out that story inside of you. So there are, even 20 years ago there wouldn't be dictation software, so that solution would not exist. So new possibilities.
What I was doing when I first started was but he's known me most of us. I know you use the computer. I would use a recording, and I would tape it, and I would have a friend of mine type it up for me.
Okay.
Only downside is everybody I know is very opinionated. So sometimes they put stuff I didn't type.
Oh.
I didn't speak in. And then I find it and I go, no. So now that I don't have to do that, I love my Kindle because I will stop It still does that, but now it's a little bit, okay, I
A little less
calm
obvious.
down. I just need to calm down. It's just not understanding. Okay. So, yeah, no, that happened more than once.
I can see that for sure.
So do we have any other comments about why people should write? Have we discussed this part of the issue to death?
Because they're alive. That's why we should.
That's a good reason.
All right. Well, I guess that can take us then to the second half of the panel, which is ways to write and get involved in writing, aside from just I'm writing a story professionally for publication where people will pay me money. So all the different ways you can get your creative outlet on.
Yes.
I have this list that I wrote up ahead of time. But do you guys want to start tossing out ideas?
Dungeon Master.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Often overlooked. That was not on my list.
If I had more time, I would 100% be
That
DMing.
has not changed.
Oh yeah. I mean, I have a friend who
I'd love to
did
do
a 3-year campaign, and she's saying like, "Oh, it really is a book." It's only this, and it was her own gaming system and her own world. So
Oh, wow.
it's like, yeah.
That's seriously creative.
Oh yeah. Well, that's Robin, of course.
Oh, Robin.
Yeah,
yes.
she's running that campaign for years. So, what else? I mean, everything. We talked about journaling a lot, and I do, and I don't do it as much as I used to, but like dream journaling, right? So like when you wake up and then you've already got the story, and then you write it down, right? So it's like the first thing you would do in the morning is write a story. It's so easy.
Are you all right?
I'm just remembering when you do that and then you're awake and you reread it and you're like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would there be demon hunters folding laundry in a hotel?
And I don't even remember writing it or having.
Well, that's your story prompt. Then you need to figure out why.
It's real life problems.
There's the opening scene, and go.
Speaking of prompts, I mean, there's so many things like that. So, like when I got married, my friend gave me this. You might have seen it. They have it at Barnes and Noble. It's like a question a day, 5-year journal, and it's got 365 pages, or 360, and each one has a question, and then it's got 5 spaces. It just says like 20, and you fill in the year or whatever. And so and you can see like how you might have changed over the space, because I'm in the last 6 months of this journal. It'll be almost my 5-year anniversary. And yeah, it's great because like some of it will be like the question will be like, what's your favorite thing to do on a Sunday morning? And that like never changes. Like my answer, my favorite thing to do on any given morning is be asleep. I don't like being awake in the morning time. But then other things like it'll be like who do you depend on right now, and like you can see like how that's changed through the space of 5 years, and it can be very surprising. So that's a really cool fun. I mean, it's kind of like weird, and now it's starting to be like, oh God, it's a burden, but I have to finish this book. So 6 more months I've got on it. That's another one. What else? I mean, yeah, you could publish your own zine. I mean, just blogging, any kind of blogging, and you start doing it. People will follow you if you do it regularly, no matter how bad you are at it, which is weird, but it happens. Yeah.
Or how much of a jerk you are.
Oh God, it's like the bigger a jerk you are, like the more followers you'll get. That's the world we're living in now.
And yet somehow we talked about you shouldn't use your writing for evil.
You shouldn't, but people do.
Some people do.
And I mean, you can do 140 character tweets, and suddenly you ascend to the highest level of government. So yeah, that's writing for evil. You shouldn't do that.
I already mentioned fan fiction.
Yeah, fan fiction.
That's one of those like going without saying thing. How about writing and drawing webcomics?
Writing and drawing webcomics, yeah. So this is sort of my story, which is that I was writing novels for years and years and years and years and years, and nobody cared. Oh my God! And like I started.
Okay, but her novel, The Hermit, is good.
My novel, The Hermit, is good, even though he found 34 typos in it.
That's a big it's fun book. It's just typos.
The Hermit by Monica Friedman. It's a good book. It's in the desert. However,
I wouldn't notice the typos.
right, exactly. However, I started drawing webcomics with literally no. I mean, I think I read a book by Will Eisner and a book by Stan Lee. And I started, and I didn't know anything about drawing. I didn't know anything about Photoshop. And I taught myself Photoshop. I taught myself digital. And and they're pretty abysmal in the beginning. And that was sort of like the gag of it, was that like I suck, but I'm going to get better. And it got to the point where like more people have read one individual comic that I've written than have read like all of my novels put together. I have comics that like thousands of people have read. So yeah, that's like, yeah. And that was sort of a shift I made a few years ago, where I started to sort of step back from what I wanted and kind of look at the world, and I start to feel like the graphic medium is the future, and getting in on it, it got me this, and then that got me, I did a comic with this woman, Linda Addison, who's a local writer you might have heard of, who's also very awesome. And so people are into that. People want pictures. So like, you've seen XKCD, like if you can draw a stick figure. I think there's a webcomic where the characters are just dots, and it's one dot talking to another dot. Yeah. And you will get way more play on that than a short story. So yeah, webcomics, great idea. What else you got?
I have taken a writing or poetry class. If you're very unconfident about your skills, you can have like formal education in that arena, like at a community college or something. I have Write with Your Friends. You don't necessarily have to have it be a critique group. This is something that we do all the time with some of our other friends. Is we go, let's get together with our laptops and write, and not talk to each other for 2 hours.
Talk to each other. So it's like perfect for introverts.
You can get a lot of work done that way, and if you're around other people.
I think I might distract people with how I have to do it.
Well, you wouldn't, because then you feel like there's this sort of weight of like, I can't interrupt other people, and also I can't not do it. I'm sitting in here, everybody's typing. I must force myself.
Already some peer pressure for good.
Yeah, but even I can't read what I type.
Well, maybe if you use dictation software, you could do like a virtual version of that. Like you could find some kind of chat app or something with other people.
Something like that,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like Slack or something.
Yeah, something like that. I've done that also with some people before, and even if we're not in the same room, I will like type, I'm here writing, and I don't know.
And then like, oh my gosh, I should be writing.
No, what I tend to do is, okay, I'm part of a WoW group.
Okay.
And they get on Mint. A lot of times I have them on push to talk. And they know I'm doing that stuff. Because occasionally they go, how much of this is going to end up in Rachel's book? I'm just they're in the background, I'm just listening to it. And I'm doing my book. Which sometimes but anyhow, if they go, Rachel, you're not in your thing. You're talking to us. Okay.
Well, it's certainly a way to get people involved in writing, although whether they want to or not, I don't know about that.
Unwilling participants.
Oh, wait, you're right.
The only time that they sometimes are like, Rachel, Ray, quit that.
I also have, we haven't talked about this, but we can touch on it, no pun intended, writing erotica. I think is a great way to get involved in writing, because there's like such a market for that. I mean, there's a huge market for romance novels.
I actually find it really funny, especially when it's you tease and then go off to something else. Because it gets their attention, and then you go to something else.
Yeah, you should go to that romance panel that Ed is doing.
Oh yeah.
Tomorrow?
Yeah, it's either tomorrow or Sunday. There's building romance when bullets fire and bullets fly and lasers fire.
I have to say,
that's what that's about? I did not get that when I was reading the panel. I did not think that was what they were talking about.
Oh.
I figured it was some sort of game.
it is, but
The greatest game.
that's another one. I had a period of my life where I was writing quite a lot of, and I wouldn't even call it erotic, it was probably pornography. But people were like, oh my god, this is the best written pornography I've ever seen. And I immediately had like 300 LiveJournal followers. Totally back when this was happening. Was when I had 300, like overnight, So yeah, people like to read dirty stories.
Graphic novels are, the female. If there are not guys getting into it, female version of
I'll tell you something. Another funny thing. So I have a friend who writes what she refers to as down market fiction, which in her case is exclusively queer romance, which is hilarious because she's a heterosexual woman and she writes only gay male romance novels, and she under a pen name even, and she put them in the Kindle store, and she's a regular income from this. Like she makes a couple $100 a month from like having like one novel and 9 short stories because people like it. And the other thing about it is that people, this is what she found in her research, people will pay money to put that stuff on their Kindle because they are embarrassed to have it in a print book. No one can tell what you're reading on your Kindle.
That's a good point.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's good marketing.
Yeah.
On that note, because how my sexuality came around was really nice. Is that bad? All my
You mean for your
characters.
characters?
Yeah, I did. I would write up the characters, the basics of them, the rigid sexuality. Something else. I roll dice for them.
I think it's a good way to not have everything be the same.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes you get people that are really interesting. And that was one of the things, because I was like, okay, I remember when I first started the book, I was very thinking, this person has to be this person has to be that, and that. And I'm not saying like they're actually, alive, but I think my characters didn't like that, if that makes sense.
It was too random, and that they wanted to be who they were.
Yeah. So when I redid them, I went, okay. And there are times that I redid it because sometimes people in the show a little too much for one thing. But I would take a die 20 for religions. And for sexuality, I flip a coin. A couple of times I've had things slapped on the side, which is fun. But I realized it changed the aspect of the story, but it made it interesting. And I just wonder, how do other people do that? How do other people pick?
Like make a determination on how much sexuality or how much eroticism to put into a story, or how to
character sexuality.
Oh, I mean, for a lot of people, I think your character starts to become real, and you'll know. Like, they'll tell you, like, well, I'm mostly straight, but that girl is beautiful, or I feel asexual, and you'll just see it as they move through the story. If they feel real to you, I think, is that...
I guess so. My experience is a little bit different because I write short fiction, and in a lot of the stories I write, the characters aren't real enough to have that dimension of them explored, or I never learned about them, or it doesn't matter to the story because it's not like a novel where you really kind of get in depth into what's inside people. In some cases, it matters.
Or it's like Leaf Smith in Love story. Like that's the romance is the aspect of it.
Yes. So I have a story in my forthcoming collection, which is a romance story, and it involves like a man falling in love with a woman. So like those sexualities are in there because it's part of the story and it makes it work. And in another story in my collection, I have two men who are in love like very late in life, and that is the fact that they're in love is important to the plot, but I could have easily made one of them a woman, but that was just something I felt like putting in. I mean, sometimes it's something that I pick on purpose, sometimes it's something that never comes up. Sometimes I have decided it randomly to be like, oh, I haven't like written a lot of lesbian characters, like I should like try writing that to see how it is. So I think it really depends. I think we have answered that question.
I was thinking about that Ed Hunard story I was talking about earlier.
Okay.
It's a science fiction romance, and it's a love triangle, but you know from the beginning which two characters are going to get together. And the third character is she's a woman, she's a battle princess, and she's extremely sexually aggressive with the male character. and just keeps trying and keeps trying and keeps rebuffing her. And then about halfway through the story, the third character has this moderate psionic ability where when she touches you, she knows your greatest desire and your greatest fear, and she touches this woman and realizes the woman's actually a deeply closeted lesbian. So, like, that's a plot twist, right? Like, there's a point to that of, like, why that's happening. So, I mean, I think when Ed wrote that story, he was like, oh, I have to have this woman, and she's actually not going to get the guy, and here are these reasons she's not going to get the guy. Yeah.
I think experimenting in romance fiction or in erotic fiction or in any work that has a romantic or erotic subtext gives you a lot more freedom to try kind of those different things. Which circles back to what I was talking about like 5 or 10 minutes ago, which is like people are very interested in erotica and romance, and even if you try to write a character that you wouldn't normally write, you're going to find somebody who's curious and wants to read about that. If you write from a sexuality that you know very well, people are going to be excited by that and want to read that. So I think you'll get a lot of reader engagement whatever you try.
People like sex.
I find it really
Yes, people like sex, in short.
I find it really interesting that actually, except for my main character, I've discovered who I thought would be main characters. Some of them have moved back.
Oh, yeah?
When some of them, and those who I never thought would have walked forward, and I'm like, wait, when that happened.
We were just talking about that earlier. Like, I am the master of writing thousands of words and then realizing I've told the story from the wrong perspective, and having to go back and like change which character is the main character. That's totally normal. So yeah, I mean, I think in your case it sounds like when you find the characters that like are speaking to you, and then they're there, and then you'll know they're there. And you'll know what to do with them.
So I've had characters that I thought would be a footnote mentioned, but
and suddenly they're really important.
And then suddenly they're really important, and I didn't necessarily expect that. Which I like.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
it means this journey is not just for the reader, this is my journey too. So it's pretty interesting. Like going with the dream thought. The night that I was starting to consider when people were saying you should come up with a side story, I was thinking about it when I went to sleep. One thing, I don't normally remember my dreams, but I remembered one thing. And I remember red-haired boy, well, strawberry blonde, and he said one thing. He goes, I may be a son of man, but I was raised by the thing. And that was enough for me to go, okay, how am I going to do this?
Inspiration can come from a lot of places where you might not expect it, and sometimes you just have to roll with it.
Yes.
That's true.
Well, I'm trying not to tell a lot, so, because I'm really bad at that.
My first novel actually came from a dream, and it's not. And it's not as if the dream and the novel have anything whatsoever in common. But I had a dream about a man and a girl fighting a witch, and the man and the girl became the characters in the story.
I guess that's another reason everyone should write, is because something in our subconscious compels us, and it can come out in dreams or other vivid images.
That's true. What else is on your list?
Oh, yes, ways to get involved in writing. Write handwritten or typed.
I mean, we're almost up.
Oh,
Read it.
yeah. Oh, okay.
Finish it. Let's go.
Oh man, I have like 10
Power
things on here. Okay, wait. Okay, we did that one. Power through. Post your writing online somewhere for free, or create free ebooks for your friends or family, or just for you. Sit somewhere in public and describe everything you see and everything that's happening as an exercise in character.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun. Really passes the time at airports. Write emails to friends where you tell a funny story about something that happened over your day, or just write emails to friends. For many years, Monica and I would write emails to each other every night to say, this is what happens today. And sometimes there would be funny stories in there.
And then we moved to the same city, and now we never talk.
We just do it with our face holes.
Yeah.
And not like, over email.
Face holes.
Write handwritten or typed or printed letters or postcards. Some people love getting printed mail.
I love sending letters.
Oh yeah.
Face hole!
And everyone loves receiving letters, and it's such a lost art. Even postcards and handmade cards. Yeah, people love getting them.
Got like a wax seal and everything. It's so much fun.
Write stories or poetry just for yourself. Sometimes if you have a very powerful story or poem inside of you that you don't feel comfortable sharing, it can still feel good to put it out on paper. As part of the knowing yourself kind of thing we were talking about earlier. Write a collection of stories or poems for a best friend or a partner. For my husband, I took a blank journal and I put love poems and illustrations in it, and I gave it to him as a gift. And he's probably going to be the only person who ever sees that thing. But still, meaningful and good to do. We talked about prompts. There's a game that I used to play in high school or middle school, Add to the Story, where you write a paragraph or a couple lines and you pass it to a friend and then they
we
continue
did that.
to
We
write
also
it.
did it as an oral game when I was a little kid. My sister and brother and I would do
Oh
that.
yeah, storytelling
Yeah,
game.
all
Somebody
the time.
talks and then you pass an object to like the next person in the circle and they have to like tell part of the story. I mentioned at the very beginning of the panel eulogies or wedding toasts. There are a few times in life where it's culturally okay for us to stand up and tell a room full of people, this is what this person means to me and this is how special they are. Those are often very overlooked opportunities that I think people should take advantage of. Even if you're too shy to deliver the thing in person, you can send it afterwards and the target of the toast can be very appreciative. I recently attended a wedding where I wanted to say a few words, but the wedding planner had everything iron locked down on schedule and there was no space for my 2-minute speech. So I mailed it afterwards to my friends who were getting married and they wrote back about how thankful they were and how very much they liked it. And maybe it'll go in a scrapbook someday, I don't know. And lastly, I have RP or role-playing, which can be for fun, sexy times or just for writing a story with someone, where you both sit on the other side of the computer and go like, I'm going to pretend to be this character, and if I was Batman, like, I would totally, like, go down the street and then punch that asshole in the face. And the person's like, well, I'm going to pretend to be that asshole, and if you punched me, this is what I would do. And it's kind of like...
It's the whole reason D&D is so fun.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
So, like, whether you do it as a tabletop role-playing game, or just as, not even with any game mechanics or a storytelling element over IM with your friends, does count as writing. So that is everything on my list. I think we are technically
We're
over
over time, yeah.
but there's hardly hordes beating down the door, so I think we're okay.
Indeed.
So thank you all for coming to our panel. I hope you got something out of it. And hey, enjoy Comic-Con.
Yay!
Thank you for listening to D&D Journey of the 5th Edition, a member of the Creative Play and Podcast Network. And remember, be careful out there. There be dragons about.